Good evening, good night, good morning, depending on what part of the world you're in, and welcome to the Black Consciousness Festival and one of our 20 conversations for 2020. This is the last week of the festival, and we thank you all for joining us on our Zoom webinar or on Facebook Live. The festival, it provides a global online platform for the commemoration, celebration, and sharing of vital histories and stories that boost the awareness and impact of the pride, power, and practice of people of African descent. Your conversation lead tonight is Salene Camille Griffith, radio personality at Heartbeat Radio, Radio for Women in Trinidad and Tobago, creative entrepreneur, amongst many other things. Welcome and enjoy tonight's conversation. Over to you, Salene.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you so very much. And good evening, good morning, good night, good day, wherever in the world that you are. Hi, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us this evening for this very, very special conversation. And if you've had the opportunity to listen to the prior conversations, you would know that it's very, very engaging, very interesting. And I'm happy that you're able to still go back and listen, even if you didn't get the live one. So also know that you can do that. I also want to congratulate the Brazilian Studies program of the Department of Modern Languages for consistency in celebrating Brazil's Black Consciousness Awareness Month in Brazil. And congratulations to you for a successful festival in 2020. We have learned so much about the Black Brazilian culture through this platform. And over the past few weeks, I certainly have been able to benefit from a lot. We have two panelists with us. Of course, this evening's conversation rather, is about faith, healing, and ancestry. And these are very broad topics, yes, and they're so intertwined to each other. We are very, very lucky to have our two panelists with us this evening. And I will not save any more time than to go introduce them myself right now. We have Caroline Amanda Borges, and she is from Brazil. Caroline Amanda Borges is a master's student in philosophy and the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, menstrual educator, which is very, very important in these times, systemic and integrative therapist, and founder of At Yoni das Pretas. I hope I pronounced that properly, Caroline, but I know you are going to share that with our listeners, our audience this afternoon about what you do. My next guest is Dr. Daniels, Dr. Kyrah Daniels, who is based in Boston. Yes? And Dr. Daniels is an assistant professor of art history and African diaspora studies with a courtesy appointment in theology at Boston College. Her research is extensive. And you're looking at them right now. They look very humble. And I love the fact that they are very humble souls. I got a good vibe from them in our pre-conversation, but they have such a wealth of information at such a very young age. So I will not delay any further than to have Caroline Amanda, introduce herself to the audience. And following that, we'll have Dr. Daniels do the same. So welcome, Caroline Amanda, to this conversation, Black Consciousness Festival 2020.
Wow, gratidão.
Thank you so much for being inviting me. I'm really happy. Trinidad and Tobago is a territory that is very precious to African diaspora and to Brazil. I only have to say thank you for this opportunity to Sean and everyone here. She presented me, like Salene presented me. I'm Caroline Amanda from the humanitarian field. I'm mastering in philosophy from UFRJ, and I've been working on practices that are complementary to health and uh, on the recovery of ancestral health and how intimate health and people who menstruate in general here in Brazil. It's the honor to share what I've been able to access and a biocycle menstrual and the effects that the system has caused on the biomenstrual health of our women and Black women here in Brazil.
Okay, so thank you so much for that, Caroline Amanda. I will hand you over now to Dr. Daniels, who will start us off first with a libation, yes? And then introduce yourself, and then we'll get the conversation, really get into the meat of it for this evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kyrah Malika Daniels. It's really a pleasure to be here with you all. And thank you so much to the Black Consciousness Festival for organizing this incredible series of events. I've had an opportunity to participate as a listener and audience member, and now the pleasure to speak and engage in conversation with Caroline Amanda and Salene Camille. So really looking forward to the conversation. In my role as a scholar of Haitian Vodou, but also as a priestess of Haitian Vodou, I would like to open this space by calling upon our ancestors. No matter what tradition you come from, whether you are Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, Ifa, diviner, if you are coming from Amazonian traditions, Candomblé, we all have ancestors. That's something that we all have in common. And I think as members of the African diaspora, we can especially appreciate the value of what it means to recognize those whose names we remember and those whose names we don't. So in proper fashion, I have my Babancourt, and I'll just say a few words here. Nous me disons merci tout royaume, merci tous ancêtres, bon Dieu, nous apprécions tout ce que vous faites pour nous, et tant pour souple, ouvrir barrière pour nous. Nous connaissons que nous pas jamais pour compte nous pas jamais marcher pour compte nous, c'est vous-même qui baille nous lumière, c'est vous-même qui baille nous valeur, c'est vous-même qui baille nous force pour faire tout le travail que nous besoin faire, parce que vous connaissez pour vous-même n'a fait ça. Me dit aïe bobo. In brief, I said to the ancestors, thank you for lighting the path for us, for opening doors. May they continue to remove obstacles for us, because the work that we do, whatever sector we may be in health, in religion, in business, in economics, whatever field we may be in, we do this work knowing that the doors have been opened for us by our ancestors. So, hey, bobo. As Salene shared, I'm an assistant professor at Boston College in the departments of art history and Africana studies with a courtesy appointment in theology. My own research focuses on sacred arts, which you see I have much behind me to keep me inspired and keep me grounded. And I also study healing traditions, specifically in the Democratic Republic of Congo and in Haiti. So looking forward to this conversation this evening about faith, healing, and ancestry.
Ancestry. Thank you so much, Dr. Daniels. Now, we're talking about Black consciousness in the overall scheme of things, and then we will drill down into actual healing. But Black consciousness and what it means to each of you, but for me, I can simply say, living in Trinidad and Tobago, Black consciousness has not, well, I can only speak for myself because what I've seen over the years is that though people who are really interested in Black culture or in the arts, or they are probably studying that, scholars like yourself, but the regular man on the street, like myself, we tend to say, okay, we're Black. We appreciate the fact that we're Black because we're seeing others like ourselves. So it's not a space where we actually feel ostracized or anything like that unless you're well-traveled. So that's the other thing. And it's only within, I've always been aware and conscious of it, but to say I've delved into it. Within the last year, I would say I have become a little more in tune with that and wanting to find out more. So I was very, very interested, and I felt honored that Sean invited me to this conversation this evening to lead this conversation, because it is something that I'm seeing all over the world, where Black consciousness, because because it's the conversation now that is really taking the forefront. You find now that we are hearing all sorts of different stories emerging. And for me, I always found that because we had to fight for our space and we had to fight for people to hear us, there was always an anger forthcoming. So when you talk about ancestry and what our ancestors had to endure and what they paved the way for us, not necessarily what they only endured, but what they started off with, what causes Black people to be at the helm of all of this so-called hostility and all of that. Dr. Daniels, what are your views on that? And what does Black consciousness mean to you?
Yes, I appreciate that question, because I think there's probably a million and one ways to answer what is Black consciousness.
Yeah.
I think for myself, in a brief conversation with Caroline Amanda, I'd like to echo something that she mentioned, which is that for me, Black consciousness is about recognizing the importance of the ancestors as those who have carved the path for us. To me, Black consciousness must be nuanced, because Blackness is actually something that's an invention of the West. That's the reality. When we as African peoples were living on the continent, we did not see ourselves as one people. We saw ourselves as Yoruba, we saw ourselves as Mukongo, we saw ourselves as Mende, right? So we had all of these different identities and our own nations, in fact, our own kingdoms, our own villages, our own nations. It was not until the transatlantic slave trade and the beginnings of colonialism that the form of Blackness was invented. What I think is powerful is in the Americas, in the latter half of the 20th century, we've begun to reclaim this notion of Blackness, not as something to be ashamed of, not these terms such as Negro or Preto, right? Or these negative connotations of Negro that have these heavy laden histories of what it means to be enslaved, what it means to be not considered a person. But we've reclaimed terms such as Black to signify our pride in who we are as people of African descent. So when I hear the term Black consciousness, I think about Africa not only as source, because it's important that we recognize that Africa does not remain in the past. It is not a country. It is a continent of 55 plus nations, diverse languages, over 2,000 different languages, in fact. And it's important to recognize that, you know, as Black conscious beings of the 21st century, we can look to Africa as, yes, a source. This is how we got to the Americas, but also as, you know, people who are continuing to live and change and define new futures for themselves as part of a new Black generation.
Absolutely. And Caroline Amanda, you are in Brazil, and of course, on the 20th of November, you would have celebrated Black consciousness in Brazil. And how many years has it been in terms of that observance and that celebration of the Black consciousness, the Black awareness in Brazil? And what does it mean for you as a Black person living in Brazil?
Yes, yes, Salene. Well, institutionally, Black consciousness is not. It's a fight. It's a fight for many decades now for the social Black movement here, for many generations now, post-abolition here in Brazil. But institutionally, it's been a little bit more than 95, 1995, the first march, the first march in Brasilia. So a bit more than 30 years, 95, 2005, a bit more than 30 years. And so what makes me think about the meaning and the sign of Black consciousness in Brazil is, above all, in this year of 2020, is the recent experience of the death, a brutal death of a brother, African diasporic brother here in a supermarket. And I'm saying that because I wanted to talk about two parallel subjects. First, the message that we received in the celebration of Black consciousness through this death that happened, this brutal death, and it was public, was publicized by the social media. And secondly, the dimension of Black consciousness that Africans in diaspora reserve within themselves and share by share through them, not just through arts or culinary arts, but through everything that we say that is a share, everything that is element of power that is not material.
That's right.
So Black consciousness, and through my place, I'm talking through my place in the Black community, is the element, the invisible element that is goes that goes forward, it goes beyond the code of blackness, beyond the code of what the colonizers created. The memory is what makes us beings of integrative. This was never removed from Black people. Yeah, this was never removed by from Black people in diaspora, and it's important to remember the invisible forces that are still there, despite all the brutalities that we face.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. And thank you so much for that, Caroline, because we oftentimes will come to the point where we understand to some extent what our ancestors had to endure. We are very thankful for that because we are here to research, we are here to tell the story, we are here to go back to that time. But in your studies, in all of the research that you've done over the years, Dr. Daniels, with regards to our ancestry, I know it's broad. It is broad, and I know that many of us, when we find out, it's literally like an aha moment. It's like, oh my gosh, I actually felt something like that. And you always tie it back, you can always tie it back to a time that you would have read about in either a book or heard it from a scholar or something like that. So everything is so connected. How are we in present time living in these modern times with all of this technology and everything available to us? How are we able to connect with our ancestors and make sure to trace the lineage back to where we came from? Because I know many of us would love to have that experience. And how has that experience been for you?
Sure. Well, a being rises. This is my cat Nzinga.
Hi, Nzinga.
um, I would say that I think the question that you pose is a really urgent one. This year of 2020 has been incredibly challenging for so many of us. There have been so many lives lost needlessly because of gross neglect of people's basic rights to healthcare. And I think I have seen an outpouring of interest from friends whom I know and from people whom I don't know, reaching out saying, I'm looking to connect. I'm looking to connect with my ancestors or with the spirits. I need divination. I need insight into the difficulties that I'm facing. I know I myself have felt some of these challenges and have definitely sought out divination from spiritual elders. And I think with regards to how somebody can begin their path, no one right way. There are
Right.
so many different paths to begin your journey. But I think in terms of a very practical answer, there are so many different traditions. And I often think that one of the best ways to start is just by connecting with your own spirits from your own lineage,
Yes.
meaning your grandparents who are deceased, aunts, uncles, loved ones who are deceased. Some of us have even dealt with the pain of losing a child before, they have grown themselves. All of these
Yes.
people are still with us. And so people can start their own spiritual journeys with a glass of water, with photographs of the ancestors, and just talk. Say, please, I need guidance. I love you. I'm grateful for all that you've done. I'm looking for answers. I'm looking for messages, and they can come to you in dreams. I think that can be a beautiful way to start. The other thing that I would say is there's a lot of reading out there about African and African diaspora religions. If it would be appropriate, I'm happy to share some links with the Black Consciousness Festival. Maybe they can post them. But what I would say is that there's also a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of very bad info on the internet, especially. And I think that's why one of the reasons that I have tried to be as open as I can be about my tradition is in part because when you can find somebody whom you trust to begin conversations about a specific tradition, about the Ifa tradition of Nigeria, Lukumi tradition of Cuba, Candomblé of Brazil, Haitian Vodou, when you can begin speaking with somebody who is a trusted member of a spiritual community, you can follow a path that somebody has already traversed before you. And so that's what I would say. You can begin with your own ancestors, you can do reading, but also you can reach out to people who are trustworthy. And how do you know? I think intuition.
My next question. How do you know?
I think intuition is very important here. If people are asking you for lots of money for things that you don't understand, no, we don't want any of that, right? If people are saying, for instance, I can solve all of your problems. Our traditions do not say that, we can wave a magic wand and make our lives better. What African traditions do is they give you the tools to be able to manage the heaviness of life and the joys of knowing who you are, of knowing your Black consciousness and your African consciousness, to be able to face the challenges that we do and to remember to dance as well.
Oh my gosh, dance, yes. I love that part. But more so, oftentimes when we hear about rituals, when we hear about that sort of the spirit, speaking to the spirits, having the glass of water. Sometimes when you hear about these things, a lot of people are not accustomed to it. So it's very taboo that people talk about it, and it's not very common in many circles. So people tend to look at it as something evil for the most part. And also people use it for evil. And I know you are of Haitian descent, yes? And we tend to hear about Haitian and voodoo in the same sentence, sounding like something evil and something very negative. And when you brought it across in the way that you did, it's all about understanding. It's all about really taking the time to research. But if someone hasn't researched, how do you get someone to change their mind? I know you said earlier that it has to be a gut feeling, and we know we get dreams. We all get dreams, some really weird dreams sometimes, and you get up and you're like, what was that about? It was connected to nothing that happened within recent time or an experience that you had. You just don't know where this experience came from, this dream came from. So the conversation about not looking upon voodoo or any of these rituals and looking to your ancestry for spiritual guidance, how do we get to change that conversation?
I'd be interested to hear Caroline Amanda's perspective, but at least in the context that I work in, I work with students, and I work with students who are 17, 18, 19, 20, and usually all that they know about Haitian voodoo is exactly what you've said. Voodoo dolls, spells, zombies, all of these things.
In movies as well, right? You see it in the movies as well. So I think it's kind of unfair that it's portrayed in that light, and we need to change the conversation. So yeah.
I agree. And I think it's very important to understand where this comes from, right? So Haiti has an important role in history of the world. We are the first Black republic. Let me tell you, Haitians, no matter who it is, no matter what age, they will know our 1804 date of independence. We were the second republic to be formed in the Americas after the United States, and we were the first Black republic to be formed in the world. This is, a triumph over slavery, a putting together of heads of people coming from diverse, different African nations, different languages, but a shared experience and struggle. White folks were afraid of what Haiti could mean in terms of liberation of all Black peoples in the Americas, as well as beyond. And so because of that, embargoes were placed on Haiti. Because of that, people assumed that Haitian Vodou must be something devilish and demonic. How else could a group of enslaved peoples fight the French army, right? And so all of these narratives emerged about Haitians having negative interactions with spirit. But to bring it to the 21st century context, skipping over quite a lot of history that's very complicated, I think in terms of changing the dialogue, we have to start with talking about what Haitian Vodou really is, which is a sister tradition of Candomblé in Brazil, a sister tradition of Lukumi, a sister tradition of Ifa, of Congo traditions. And I think it's very appropriate that our conversation is about healing and ancestry, because Vodou is ultimately about healing. It is about restoring balance to people's lives when things are out of sequence, when things are feeling chaotic. The idea is that you can come to a healer and say, I need a ritual bath to cleanse me of these impurities, or I'm looking for a divination reading so that I can gain more insight into the problems that I am facing to restore balance to my life. So how do we change these myths and understandings? We have to understand that it is about anti-Blackness. People who are afraid of Vodou, it is because we have been made as Black people to be afraid of our own Blackness and our own Africanness. And we have to unlearn that the only God who loves us is a white Jesus with blonde hair and blue eyes. Because I could tell you, that's not where Jesus was from.
We know that, huh?
We know that. Some of us know that, right?
Well,
some
true.
of us know that. So I think it's helpful for us to think every other religious tradition in the world, Indians, looking at Muslims from Southeast Asia, looking at Muslims from, the Middle East. If you look at different religious traditions all around, their God, their spirit is a reflection of them. Why should we as Black people not also have spirits who look like us? Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, Caroline Amanda, what is your take on what we were talking about in terms of the practices and stuff like that?
Hello.
Tá me ouvindo?
Can you hear me?
I'm hearing you now. Yes.
Sim.
Ah, por favor, repita a pergunta para o tradutor traduzir na íntegra.
Can you repeat the question so that the interpreter can reproduce all the messages you said previously?
Oh,
As you said it?
okay. Well, based on what Dr. Daniels was talking about, we were speaking about the ancestry and the way that it's being viewed currently in the 21st century, the fact that all of the practices, our spiritual practices, the African practices of spirituality, oftentimes is frowned upon as evil. And I wanted to find out from your perspective, how is that? How do you cope with that as a young person in Brazil, in the Black community generally? How do you cope with that? And also, why do you think that it's being looked upon in such a negative manner?
Uau!
Thank you, Salene, for that question. Firstly, is that there's some movements that are contemporary that are happening in relation to health. Above all, here in Brazil, it's the territory that I live in. That's the one I can speak about. The first movement is a movement that is territorial. So each time more we have less herbs. We have a lot of uh, cutting through nature, and herbs, crystals are the materialization of the spirit of cure. So when we have a construction of urban cities that is completely unarticulated and disarticulated from nature, we have a movement uh, that away from ancestrality. And the second point is that we have a growing culture and values of neo-Pentecostal values.
Right.
So today we have a growing exercise of Judeo-Christianism, values of Judaico-Christianism in the Black community. This is also an element that brings about some challenges when talking about health, ancestrality, without getting into prejudice barriers. The third point that is really important in my way of seeing is there's a kidnapping
Mm.
of people that are white and are rich that appropriate from this ancestral knowledge from cure and ancestrality that black people developed for their own survival from north to south in Brazil. So today, if we want to use the term certain practices, we need to uh, go to expensive places or people or know exactly where we can still find this in a traditional place. In general, here in Brazil, in candomblé places, candomblé temples, where or even in the outskirts of the cities here. But this is very important to reflect and to get a bit on what the doctor was saying in relation to see how the articulations to disconnect us
Mm.
from our spirits, us from our ancestral are
Absolutely.
many.
Yeah. Yeah.
From nature distraction to all the way to the search that is impacted through the colonial system. So
Mm.
if I can talk about a reflection that I've been having constantly, is that the last frontier, the last border, is the spirits, the spiritual world, the ancestral world is the last frontier. It's the spirits, and they try to access them. They have been trying to creating adverse obstacles to for us to not believe, to not
Right.
uh, have a relationship, for us to have a relationship that of not believing. Not believing is the main feeling that disconnects us from ancestral. If we have doubts, if we do not have trust in ancestrality, then they win because we will not be able to connect with ancestrality.
Yeah. And it's not even a situation where we are trying to be angry. We just want to live. We just want to connect like everyone else is connecting to their roots. And it brought, when Caroline Amanda was speaking just now, it reminded me of the way that Black people behave with each other. That in itself, the way, in Trinidad, I don't know if you all know about this particular phrase that is used. They call it the crab in bucket syndrome, where we pull each other down. We do not support each other. And I oftentimes will say to my friends and my siblings and stuff, I said, do you realize that the Black community is the only community that doesn't really support each other in business or anything at all. We are trying to do it now, thank God. Thank God, we're trying to do it now, but it's not in the majority. And I said, it must mean that we came from some sort of royalty. It has to mean that we have a certain amount of strength that someone or a group of people will go out of their way to make sure that we don't know where we came from, or that we don't know how to support each other, that we will stand against each other. And this is the time now where the conversation is taking place, where we need to fight that and move on to really uniting as a community, not ostracizing anybody. Because for me, I have been that person who believes in, yes, this is the human race, we are one, we are all one, until I've realized how our brothers and sisters have to deal with racism outside of, and well, I'm even seeing it in my own country now, unfortunately. I'm seeing it where it's raising its ugly head here, and I'm like, come on already. We're not built for this. And with respect to healing now, let's segue into the healing aspect of it, because we're talking about seeking our ancestors for guidance, for in terms of spirituality. We're seeking our ancestors to lead us and to guide the path for us as we go forward in life and we carry the baton of our Blackness. But in terms of healing, uh, oftentimes we know we go to the doctor for a medical, we have to. In some cases, it's a must. You have to present your medical documents to be able to access other services and stuff like that. A lot of people rush to medication to cure an illness or whatever, rather than just sitting and being quiet and having a reflection or something like that, right? What are your thoughts on that, Caroline Amanda? We will get to the part where we talk about the menstrual aspect of it eventually, but I really, really want to talk about healing in its broader sense, because I remembered in my younger years, my grandmother, she would talk about going to someone about healing. And our family was like, what is she even talking about? Where is she going? We need to go to the doctor, you know? So let's talk about the healing aspect of seeking our ancestral assistance or guidance in that regard.
Ah, que pergunta
Yeah,
gostosa.
that is a really joyful question to
Uma
answer.
coisa que eu acredito
One thing that I
que
believe
algo muito
is
importante.
that
A Organização Mundial de Saúde
for
reconheceu
a
que
small
a
time now,
doença
for
de
a short
saúde
one, that
não só
the
física,
World Health
mas
Organization
saúde
uh,
mental, emocional,
recognize that there are five types of health: the family health,
a
financial health,
saúde
and
emocional.
emotional health, physical
E
health.
eu ouso dizer
And
aqui
I would
que a
say
OMS aprendeu
that
isso nos povos
the health
indígenas.
organization,
A
World
OMS
organization
aprendeu isso nos
learned
povos
that with the
indígenas,
original
né?
uh,
A gente ensinou
people
para o mundo
through the
que
through African people.
ainda que o
We
corpo
thought
seja
that
aceitado,
although the
se o
body is
espírito
accepted,
estiver
if the
preservado,
spirit
nós
is preserved,
sobreviveremos.
we will survive.
Então, a
Mm-hmm,
dimensão de
mm-hmm.
saúde
So
somente
if
serão
the World
criadas
Health Organization was
realmente
only able
após
to
esse
be
elemento
broadened through the elements,
horrível que foi a
uh,
colonialidade.
through
E
this
essa
element that is
colonialidade
horrible, that was
teve a
the
possibilidade
colonialism.
de expandir, infelizmente, a partir da colonização
Colonialism
do
brought
Equador,
about
sentidos
the
de saúde.
possibility
Então, esse é o primeiro ponto.
of, through a
O
lot of
segundo
pain,
ponto
bring
é
about
que
possibility of those
a sua
teachings.
avó estava certa, claro,
And
né?
your voice was correct,
E
right? What you
falar
said was
sobre a
correct.
dor é o
Thinking,
primeiro caminho
talking
para a cura.
about pain
E
is
a
the first step
foca,
to cure.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
né? A fala
Learning cures,
nós somos o
speaking
povo da
cures.
oralidade.
We are the
Então,
people
quando
of
a gente
orality,
fala,
of
ui,
speak. So
ui, quando a
when we
gente se
speak,
cura.
we
Quando a gente
cure
ouve,
ourselves.
a
When we
gente
listen,
promove a cura.
we
E
promote
isso não é
cure.
pouca coisa.
And this is
Isso
not
é muita
little.
coisa.
This is not something
E,
small. This is
Mm-hmm.
something
e
huge.
aqui no
And
meu trabalho,
here my work as a therapist, integrative therapist, is has a lot of the proposal of listening and talking, and also the articulation of not just me but also other therapists that are black here in Brazil that would say that ancestral technologies of cure, because what we experiment here as tools of surviving, there these are technologies. These are technologies that are very articulated, that are complex, and that have comproved efficacy, because we're still alive until today, and uh, they have more efficacy than they comprove, because we are still living, we are producing life through arts, through the research, through
Wow. Yes.
culinary sciences, through music, life through our bodies. So the meanings of cure are very humble. There are many, and there are many and multiple and possible and accessible, because we developed these technologies
Mm.
through our survival. So, if I can talk about cure in a place that is articulated through ancestrality, I need to recognize the complexity of these technologies, um, that go above the body. They go the need to talk about the sensations that cause a certain pathology in the body, the emotion that caused a certain unbalance in my organic system, in my emotional system, familiar system, financial system. These are my health. We need to listen. So your grandma was correct.
You know, they're always correct, right? Our grandparents are always correct. Oh my goodness. Because there would have been times when we would be like, why is she smoking out the house? Why are we smelling this? And could be we don't know about these things as kids, right? And we're like, why is she smoking out the house this, with garlic and all of these things? But she knew what she was doing. And God rest her soul, but she knew what she was doing. And with regards to the female reproductive system, and I know this is your area of expertise, Caroline Amanda. I love the term woman in terms of talking about women. You know, we are literally the womb of society, right? We bring forth life, of course, with the help of our partners and that kind of thing. But to hold this child within our womb and be able to reproduce is an amazing, amazing privilege. I always say it's a privilege uh, to bring forth new life. And I have I have a twin. I have two kids. They're 14 now. And I oftentimes will tell them, y'all don't know how lucky you are. Because it never crossed my mind to do anything out of the ordinary because in our family, it's like, okay, you get pregnant, you know what to do. We're bringing life. A child is a blessing from God. And I always had this feeling that I would never be able to have children. I don't know where I got it from. And then I said, you know what? If I have to have children, it'll better be a twin. And so said, so done. So I had myself a twin, and yet still, throughout my years, even before that, when I started to go through the menstrual cycle, and even after pregnancy and all now, you find that it's very, very painful. And my recent visit to the gynecologist is telling me that you can either remove the fibroids or remove the uterus. And I'm like, first of all, I have to think about this because I'm accustomed to enduring my pain. I said everything happens for a reason, and I endure my pain. It reminds me of my womanness. And so, in terms of that spiritual healing that we get, and as it relates to the menstrual cycle, your area of expertise, Caroline Amanda, would you mind sharing that with us?
Claro.
Yes, most certainly. Uh, well, wow, Salene, and everyone who's watching us.
Mhm.
Um, the womb, I believe, before everything, I believe that everyone come to the world with a mission.
Mm.
And I'm a person that accepted the calling of listening with all attention, the female reproductive system, the uterus, the vulva, the vagina, uh, all this system that is a big portal to life, in the sense of life and death. The uterus is the sense of life and death inside our own body. Uterus is uh, the place of where Oshun lives, but also the crossroads of Ishu. To bring about the Yoruba references into this conversation. And when the medicine, allopathic medicine that is patriarchal, that is hero-referenced,
Mhm.
suggests the removal of a uterus, uh,
Mm.
of what we call technically hysterectomy. We don't just remove a uterus, we amputate a part of a body,
Mm.
we mutilate a part of a body. So, for example, if we go to an optometrist and we have an ocular issue, no one is going to suggest removing the whole eye, and no orthopedic doctor is going to remove your whole legs. Why does the gynecologist suggest the removal of uterus with all this calmness and naturality? I asked that because the answer has many insights, and for us Black women, people that are that menstruate and are Black, this is firstly a strategy that's genocidal, and one that tries to avoid that our community is continues to live and is in expansion. So if I remove a uterus, I prevent African people from being born, and that is very serious. Beyond that community impact, there's also a self impact, impactful.
Yes.
There's studies that were developed in England that people that live through the hysterectomy, whether partial or fully, they have 40% more chance of developing Alzheimer.
Mm.
They have predisposition for depression and euphoric dis- issues. For the beyond the community issues, what does it mean for women and especially Black women of being amputated of their main organ? So if you think about that Black women are the main transmitters of knowledge in diaspora, since our Black men are murdered and have a life that is less long than our lives, and we're main transmitters of knowledge. What does it mean for us to live through hysterectomy and losing our memory? So, curing the uterus is curing the wombs that brought us into this world, and the pain, although common, is not natural.
Mm.
The Occidental system is the one who taught us to live with pain. But living with pain is not something that means health. we need to know the meaning of that pain. We need to listen to what our womb is saying. It hurts, Salene. It hurts, woman. What does your womb want to say with that? What
Mm,
is uncomfortable there?
yeah.
Uh, what needs to be in a zone of for observation? We need to know what did it hurt in our ancestors that is still hurting in me.
Mm,
This question is going to bring about our cure, the cure of the one before us and the cure that ones are coming. Curing ancestral cure is curing before us and curing after us.
mm. Wow. I almost teared up for that. 'Cause I'm a crier, but oh my gosh. That was so profound. Wow. You see, we're living in a time now where everything is so fast paced, and we've learned that, okay, with the advancement of time, there's the advancement of technology and the advancement of practices. And so, having a hysterectomy, if you are experiencing pain, if you have fibroids, if you have anything that will affect your life from moving forward in the way that you want it to, it's to get rid of it or to find a quick remedy to it. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's up to the individual, your choice. It's your choice. But the part with the med, checking in with your ancestors to determine what's causing the pain, that one really hit me. It really hit me because I've had my mom, she passed on now, but she has had a hysterectomy because she had fibroids as well. I now have fibroids, but I told my doctor, I'm not doing it. Not just yet. Let me find out. Let me deal with my pain. There's, as I said before, there's a reason for that. So, in terms of that healing aspect of it, do you, the choice that you make, Dr. Daniels, the choice that you make to not want to use Western medicine for your healing, or not concentrate on Western medicine for your healing, or to go to your ancestors first to guide you as to what steps you should take, even if they say, yes, go to the doctor. Have you ever had an experience like that where your ancestors will actually guide you to that part to say, yes, I think you need to go to the doctor?
So first, let me just echo your own statement to say, Caroline Amanda, thank you so much for
Yes.
that insight. I'm so grateful when I have the opportunity to hear from fellow sisters in the struggle who identify that our bodies, our Black bodies, our women bodies are not the problem. It is a history of racism in science and racism in the medical profession and sexism in the medical profession that tells us that we are the problem. And I would also like to say that, it's important to keep two things in mind, I think, in the conversation about religion and specifically Africana religions and healing. One is that, there's this understanding, just as you said, Salene, that the advances of modern technology bring us these unprecedented leaps and bounds in success and progress with things like the health profession and medicine. But where does this medicine come from? Originally, it comes from plants. The forest, the sacred grove was our first medicine cabinet.
Yeah.
Right? And I think what is powerful is if you look at indigenous traditions all over the world, in Asia, in Latin America, in Africa, including in Europe, in the Americas, right? You see that people have understood how to live in harmony with the natural world, to be able to draw medicine from the forest without devastating the natural environment, right? So I think it's important to understand where medicine comes from. Now, today, medicine is sometimes fabricated in the lab, but the origin of it comes from the natural world. I think the second thing to keep in mind, I get this question a lot from my students, from colleagues, from people, frankly, who don't respect or understand what I do.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's a terrible idea when witch doctors tell you to avoid the hospital and just to rely on magic and superstition to heal you. What good can that do? And there are several grave misunderstandings in that type of question. First, I want all of you to remove the term witch doctor from your mind. That is not a term. We have terms for our priests and our priestesses, and often that term is connected to the word healer. Not always, but it was understood that to serve the spirits is to serve and respect the natural environment in which we live, because the spirits live in the ocean, they live in the mountain, they live in the forest, they live in the desert, right? And so to be able to serve the spirits, you had to be in harmony with the natural environment, and that meant learning how to heal. I think what I will say regarding the second component of the misunderstanding there, about why would you disregard Western medicine, many of the healers, many of the priests and priestesses whom I worked with in Haiti, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, people whom I've met in Ghana, Nigeria, they don't necessarily tell you don't go to the Western hospital.
Right.
We traditional healers are often very open to integrating different systems of healing. It is unfortunately the Western hospital that is reluctant and refuses to work with us. If we take, for instance, the example of midwives, in the Western world, you have women lying on their back, expected to give birth in a horizontal position. That doesn't make any sense. The majority of cases that people are taken to go to a cesarean is not because the child is in danger, the baby's in danger, or the mother is in danger. A lot of times it's for other complications that have arisen. Sometimes it's because a doctor wants to control their own schedule, right? And in the indigenous traditions of so many parts of the world, it's understood that the woman crouches so that gravity can help her birth this child, right? So why wouldn't midwives all over the world be brought into hospitals and say, what are the things that we can learn from you? In French, in Haitian Creole, we call them femmes sages, wise women. And aren't midwives wise women? That is precisely what they are, right? Yeah. Why wouldn't there be more interaction? I'll give one brief example here. When I was conducting research in the Congo, I had worked with a journalist who was my translator with a particular healer. She identified herself as Catholic, and she heard visions and received messages from God and from the Virgin Mary. And he had a late on-stage case of diabetes, and she says, go to the hospital for this. You need medicine from the hospital from this. So he did, and she said, but come back. And he came back, and she blessed the medicine that he had been given. And I thought, what a beautiful integration of systems. It does not mean that you have to choose one or the other, traditional medicine, Western medicine. Rather, and this is, last thing I'll say about this is something that we already see with Eastern traditions. Look at acupuncture from the Chinese traditions. Look at Ayurvedic medicine from India. Look at Reiki from Japan. I think everybody in the world now knows about yoga, which, by the way, is a spiritual tradition.
Yes, it is.
Focused on the body and on health, right? So why is it that we're comfortable integrating these Eastern religions and healing systems into our lives, but we say that the juju and the fetish is not okay? The traditional healing systems that have worked are not okay coming from Africa and the diaspora. That's what we need to reevaluate in a way that's not exploiting Black people, in a way that's not extracting knowledge and taking opportunities, but rather that is a reciprocal type of relationship between Africana healers and Western healers.
Oh my gosh, I loved that delivery. It just brought everything together. And I just wanted to let our audience know as well that you have the question and answer segments. If you want to ask Dr. Daniels or Caroline Amanda any questions about anything that we're speaking about right now, feel free to do so. And I've seen some people have been sharing their thoughts as well. So thank you so much for engaging us in this. Caroline Amanda, in terms of the menstrual cycle, take us through your area of expertise and what this means to you in terms of blackness, in terms of um, this whole realm of ancestry and all of that, because we touched on it just now when we're talking about that pain is there for a reason. But menstrual pain that we get, and we, as we know it growing up, it's because Eve ate the fruit or encouraged Adam to eat the fruit. That's what we heard. But what is your take, or what are your views rather, on this whole situation with women having to go through the menstrual cycle? When we know this is what enables reproduction, but the painful aspect of it, we know that there's a reason for the pain, but how do you treat with that in your area of expertise?
Salene,
Salene,
o,
well,
a filosofia
the
e
philosophy and
tradição
tradition that comes from
reduziu a
Judaico-Christianism
mulher à
blamed the
dor
woman
em duas
with
ocasiões,
pain in two
no
occasions,
parto
Mm,
e
in
na
birth
menstruação.
and in
Então,
menstruation, their
segundo a
period.
tradição judaico-cristã, o
And
parto
in
precisava
Judaico-Christian
ser
religion,
finalizado quando se
the
tornava
birth needed to
dolorido
be
e muito
penalized,
sofrido,
it needed to
enquanto a
come through
menstruação se
pain,
tornou
mm,
and menstruation
também uma
to
experiência orgânica que
uh, be
gerasse muito
penalized
sofrimento acima de
and bring
punição.
about a lot of suffering.
A grande questão é que muitos estudos, e não
So
só estudos
many studies
principalmente
that
africanos, mas
n- not just the ones that involve the African
indígenas,
continent, but
indígenas,
the
fala sobre
indigenous
fala sobre o parto
studies
enquanto
talked about
prazer,
birth as
porque o Ocidente hoje
a
busca
time of
as
pleasure,
mulheres
as a
brancas
time
especificamente
because the
um
Western
parto
culture
orgástico que
uh, tries
estabilize
to
o
bring
parto,
about the orgastic
porque não só
birth
nunca ser
because
dolorido,
we
mas
already
ele
know today
seja
that it doesn't
orgásmico
have to
de
be
prazer,
painful, but it can be
né?
something
Esse é um
orgasmic.
ponto. E
It
o
is
outro
one
ponto
point.
é a
Uh,
experiência de pessoas que
and
menstruam.
the other point
E
is an experience of
entender
someone who
as
menstruates as a
variáveis
period and understanding the
relacionadas
variables
por
of the phases
compartilhar da fala
of the menstrual
se
cycle.
organizam
They can
para não se
organize
incorporar
themselves
em
to not
representação das próprias
overweigh their bodies.
A
mm,
And
pré-menstruação,
so
a
the
tensão
premenstrual, the
pré-menstrual,
tension that
ela é
is
comum,
premenstrual, it's
mas ela
common,
não é normal.
but it's not normal.
E
mm,
porque cada vez mais a
But
mulher tem
why does each
sentimento
time
pré-menstrual? Porque
we
normalmente essa
increase of
idade
premenstrual
todas as pessoas
pain?
têm.
Because
E
the Western
todas as
world is where everyone
potências estão no
stands.
ombro das
Because
mulheres.
all
E
the
nessa sociedade,
uh,
as mulheres realmente
sickness is
usam
on the
o
shoulders of
pré-menstrual. As
women.
mulheres são tensas
Uh,
ao longo
because women
de toda
are
a sua vida
tense
toda.
along
E
their
a
whole lives
menstruação é
in
a
the Western world.
oportunidade
And
da mulher
the
fazer
menstrual
uma
period is the
trajetória
opportunity
e
to
perceber
look to
as coisas
herself
não vão
and
bem.
to notice
A questão
things
é
are not
que o
going well.
Ocidente,
The thing is that
cada
the
vez que essa
Western
mulher
mold
percebe
is
que as
that
coisas
each
não vão
time
bem,
that
o
they
Ocidente
notice that
convida
things are
a
not going well,
anestesia.
the Western
Onde
world
consegue
invites for her to
através
for
desse sistema de
anesthesia.
inibição do ciclo
The
menstrual,
inhibition
a pessoa
of
consegue perceber
their
o
blood,
quanto o
menstrual blood,
orgasmo, o quanto a
uh,
cordialidade, o
medication pain. We
quanto a
don't notice
misoginia, o
how
quanto o
uh,
machismo
the
tensiona cada órgão,
machismo,
cada feição
how all the
da mulher.
factors
Então, o Ocidente
that
convida
inhibit
para anestesia.
her
O
spirit
Ocidente
uh,
convida para anestesia.
affect her.
E
So
a
the
menstruação,
Western
inclusive,
system
eu
invites
acredito,
her
a
to
partir do meu
remove her
trabalho, é uma
sexual
oportunidade que a
organ
gente
or main
tem de
organ.
reavaliar mês a
And this
mês
is an opportunity
como
to
está a
reevaluate
menstruação.
each month and regain our life and our
Então,
independence.
Salene, se eu puder te dizer
mm,
If
sobre
we could
a
tell you
importância da
about the
menstruação na
importance of
contemporaneidade, a
menstrual
menstruação ela
cycle in
ocupa
our
um lugar
contemporary world,
menstrual de
our
alerta.
menstrual
E
cycle
antes
is
de
the main
terminar, eu queria
alarm
aqui fazer uma
in,
convocação
and
a
I
que a gente
wanted to call
relembre os
upon you to notice uh, the the history of menstrual cycle before the colonialism. If we're in Candomblé, we know the stories that show in the stories of Oshun and Yansan, Yamanja. We notice that menstruation is power. No Yabas saw menstruation as weakness or shame or something that was not useful. For all Yabas, menstruation is something that comes from a place of power. So when do we lose the memory of the power of our menstrual periods? When did this happen? Most certainly, it has to do with racism. My work has this important uh, this important role of us noticing the importance of this moment.
Mm, wow. And I thank you so much for what you do in terms of bringing that awareness and enlightening women to not look upon ourselves as, oh my gosh, why do I have to go through this 5 days a month? But instead to embrace it because we can't do anything about it. We have to experience it. And it's really a part of our lives. As I said before, it reminds us of our womanness. Yes. It's now in my time, it's 8:17. So we are getting ready to wrap up in a short while. Let me see if we have any questions for our two panelists. Someone wrote, uh, are you all able to see Amanda and Dr. Daniels? Are you all able to see the comments as well?
Não consigo.
I can't see the comments.
Oh yeah, because I will have to translate it. You'll have to get it translated. So Mary Ball is saying, as a man, beau, and sister to Dr. Daniels, I also comment as a registered nurse. I want to piggyback on what she said about traditional healers working with Western medicine and doctors. I often get clients who come to me for voodoo work and they have health problems. I also look at their health issue from a spiritual and physical perspective. For example, I can encourage a person struggling with diabetes, an all too common problem in the Black and Caribbean community, to do some healing baths with the Iwa to give them the strength and persistence to stick to their medication and diets. I can also ask the Iwa or Iwa to help find the person, the best doctor or healthcare provider for them, someone who will listen to them and provide care that is holistic and not dismissive of their experience as a Black and non white or non American person. And that was a beautiful, beautiful viewpoint there. Very beautiful viewpoint in terms of
Você
what
está
we were
traduzindo?
talking
Eu não estou te
about.
ouvindo.
Sorry.
Were you translating? I wasn't able to hear.
Oh,
Eu li,
okay.
eu li. Eu li o texto.
I read the text. So.
Okay, well, okay. So you would have been able to get that. Okay.
Show, show.
Yes. And that was a very, very interesting comment there. And I know that Dr. Daniels, you would have responded to David Banfield. He said, when you go to Catholic priests for guidance, it is okay, but when you go to Orisha, you are considered devil. That is the white racism against anything African. All right. So we have people who are understanding the viewpoints that have been expressed this evening. And before we close off, I wanted to ask each of you to share with us your viewpoint in terms of before you started your work in Black consciousness and in your particular space of expertise, before you got to that point, how has your journey been from that point and deciding that this is what you want your life's work to be? Because this is your life's work, you're literally sharing yourselves with the world and giving us information that we probably don't even know how to start to look for it. So initially, I want to thank you for that. But how has your journey been from the moment you decided to get into this path to where you are at now? Dr. Daniels, you can go first.
Certainly. And let me first saluer Mambo Mali. Merci en pile, Somna. Wonderful to have you joining us for the conversation. And I will build upon that in my answer, which is that I have known for a long time that I've been interested in the arts and in religion, but my interest in traditional healing came about later on in my path. I felt that in meeting people who were dealing with various health conditions, I felt that we especially seem to not know what we are doing with the matter of mental health in the West. I think that we ostracize and isolate people who deal with mental health conditions. I think we don't understand these conditions. And I think we give people a lot of pills and put them in rooms and tell them to talk about their problems and not involve the family and not involve, a more holistic approach to healing. So I would agree with what my sister has said in that, you can have a condition that is physical, that is psychological, and it can also have other dimensions. It can have, in fact, spiritual dimensions. I think one of the things that I encountered that was very powerful in both Congo and Haiti is the understanding that those who hear voices or who experience sensations that other people are not experiencing through seeing things or hearing things may in fact have a gift. In the West, we identify this as schizophrenia, right? And we say these people have no control over what they're seeing and hearing, and we need to give them medication, and they may need to be sedated. And this is the sort of approach that we have, right? In other parts of the world, and in particular in Congo, where I've done research, and in Haiti, I think people say that yes, when you don't have control over when you are hearing voices or seeing things, that can feel disorienting, it can feel overwhelming, but it means perhaps that you have a gift and that you are able to serve as a channel, as a medium, and as a bridge between the visible world of humans and the invisible world of spirits. Because the reality is that diviners, healers, priests and priestesses who work in Africana traditions often communicate with the other world to come back with messages to relay to their clients and to their patients. And so part of the work of initiation is learning how to open that portal so that you can communicate with the ancestors and the spirits, and also how to close that portal so that you do not become overwhelmed with messages.
Yes.
And I think that this is just one example of many, many instances that we can learn from other perspectives of how a problem or a condition that we struggle with can have physical or psychological roots and also be connected to spiritual traditions, and that we can seek power and we can seek empowerment even in our traditions as to how we might address this differently. Perhaps that doesn't mean you don't take medication from the hospital that's given to you by a psychiatrist, but perhaps there are other approaches to integrate with that medicine. And perhaps by learning about your own relationship to the spirits, you can begin to approach your own health and your own healing in a different fashion. So when I say that, my own path has had many twists and turns, I think what keeps me grounded is realizing that African and African diaspora traditions have so much to offer the world, especially in the domain of healing, because they are not understanding a person as just a physical body. They're understanding people as part of a family unit, as part of a community unit. Those people need to be integrated in their healing. They're understanding the person to have a physical self, but also a spiritual self and a psychological self that all need to be integrated and that all need to be brought together for balance, so that the person can achieve wholeness and ultimately a greater sense of healing. So that's what draws me to my work. That's what keeps me here. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share in this conversation.
Thank you so very much. And Caroline Amanda, you're very, very young as well, just like Dr. Daniels. I cannot believe how much you two ladies have done and accomplished in your work so far. And you're very, very young. And this passion has to come from somewhere. So, Caroline Amanda, what has your journey been like in terms of the work that you do in terms of healing?
Salene,
Salene,
é,
uh,
eu sou filha de uma
I'm
mulher
as
que viveu
I'm daughter of a woman
três
who lived
partos e eu
through
nasci
three difficult. I was
é um tipo de
difficult.
parto que não
I was
é
born through forceps.
seguro nem autorizado
Forceps
pelo
is not
SUS.
giving.
Então,
It's not authorized anymore.
a minha mãe teve
Uh,
eclâmpsia
my mother had
gêmea
eclampsia.
que morreu dentro da
I
barriga
had.
dela. E
She had
aí,
a
20 dias
child
depois
who
do
died
neném nascer,
inside her womb.
eu tenho uma
Uh,
avó que
another
morreu
by
esperando
20
o neném.
days after
E eu tenho uma
because of
bisavó que morreu
doctor
esperando a
negligence.
filha
I had a
engravidar.
grandmother who had hysterectomy
Então,
and Alzheimer's.
os saberes
And
que me atravessam
so
não
the
são meus.
knowledge that
Os saberes
what
que me
came through
atravessam
me are not
são
mine.
saberes da minha lineage.
This is a knowledge that is comes through my
Então,
lineage.
tudo que eu posso
And
falar
so
hoje
everything that I can talk
tem
about
a ver com a
here
minha história e com a
is
sua
about
história.
my
E
story and our history, the story of your mother,
a
the
história
story
da
to
minha mãe.
your visit to the doctor, the story to
E eu
so many
aprendo
of
todo
us.
dia.
And I learn every day, every
Então,
session, every
eu
book.
vivo um
Uh,
momento de expansão
I am living through a
íntima.
moment of expansion in my
Presente,
life,
assim, como
and
doutora, eu sempre tive
and as a
a
doctor,
certeza de
I
ter uma
always
ligação com os
I was always
ancestrais e com
sure
espíritos
that
muito próximos.
having
Embora
ancestral and
não
spirits
não
connection was important,
organizado.
and not
A minha família é
was not
evangélica,
very
então
organized
eu não
because
tinha a
my
oportunidade de
family
ter
is
uma
evangelic.
relação organizada com
So was not a
espiritualidade.
relationship that was very
Tinha
organized,
e
and
retinha,
I
então,
had it and I retained it
mas ao longo da
because I
vida,
had to.
os ancestrais para
But
mim
along my life,
me trazem
the
esse tipo de
ancestors
conexão.
uh, presented
Agora
me
sim,
with possibilities of reconnection, and I accepted all of those,
o que me
all
fez
that they
conectar
brought me.
com a saúde
And what
foi
had me connect
a
with
morte.
health
Aqui
and
no Brasil,
cure was the death.
de eh,
Because here in
dos
Brazil,
15 até
I
os
lived for 10
25
years,
anos,
from
uma
15 to
experiência de
25.
fluxo,
A
de
militant
denúncia
experience
ao
of
genocídio que o
denouncing
povo negro
the
fez.
genocide that Black
E
people are going through
eu
here.
vivi
And I
infelizmente
saw and I
mais de
lived
uma
with
desproporcionalidade
many
que algumas
mothers who had
famílias
their child
que viviam muitas
murdered, that
situações
had were going
psíquicas
through a lot of menstrual problems,
e
menstrual
em algum
issues, that
momento
had a lot of
essas
psychological
pessoas
issues, and this.
experimentam e adoeceram
Issues
muito.
were
E
coming to me
quando
that
foram
they were making me
adoecer,
sick, and when my
eu
body
procurei
started to get
ajuda.
sick, I had
E
to
como
seek
eu
help.
procurei,
When I cured,
eu voltei
when
para
I got
dizer para as
cured, I
mulheres
came back to
que
those
não
women
basta
to
só
tell them
denunciar a morte.
it's not
É
enough
preciso
to
trazer
denounce
a
death.
vida e a
It's
vida
also
da
important
vida.
to promote
Então eu estou muito
life
honrada de
because
estar
life
nessa
comes from our
jornada,
womb.
de
So I'm very
anunciar
honored to be
que o bem viver passa pelo bem
in this
nascer,
path.
passa pela manutenção da saúde dos ventres
And
das
it goes
nossas
through the
mulheres.
maintenance of health and our community.
I love when people can recognize their purpose. You may not know it in its entirety, but you definitely have that gut feeling. And we now have established that that gut feeling is your ancestral guidance, that thing that really gnaws at you, telling you you have to do this. And I am really, really honored and grateful to have shared this conversation with you, ladies. Thank you so very much for your passion for you, the passion that led to you being so authentic in what you do every single day and what you continue to do, because I'm pretty certain that our world is going to hear so much more about Black consciousness, our African ancestry, and the importance of who we are as a people. I'm also very grateful for this forum and many more like it, because we learn so much from each other. We may not be able to cross the borders just yet, but we definitely are in a space where we can use technology virtually to come together and share our experiences. I'm very, very grateful for that. So I just wish you all blessings to continue on your path. And I hope that this connection doesn't die, that it continues to grow and your message continues to spread. And we wish you blessings. I will pass you over now to Sean from the Black Consciousness Festival, as he will close off this evening's webinar for us. And I thank our audience as well for your attentiveness and sharing as well. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Sean.
Thank you, Salene. Thank you. And
Thank you
thank
so
you
much.
to Dr.
Yeah.
Daniels and Caroline Amanda as well for saying yes to the invitation and for taking the time out in spite of so many other things that you could have been doing tonight. Thank you to all who joined us tonight. Make sure to tell a friend, a colleague, or family member about the rest of the festival. We only have a few days left. Coming up this week, tomorrow, we have a limbo workshop that will come to us from a limbo dancer, professional out of Tobago. And then on Friday night, at the same time, we have a conversation with some of our other Brazilian sisters from Salvador, Bahia. We'll be talking about creating space to resist and repair the case of Salvador's Afro Blocos in their carnival. And then on Saturday, we have some more cultural activities, the evolution of Jamaican dance workshop, and DJs in the dance later on in the night. And on our final day, on November 30th, which is next Monday, we have three very special conversations beyond the celebration, because November 30th is also the independence of Barbados. So we'll be talking to the ambassador of Barbados to Brazil. And later on in the afternoon, we will have a conversation about South cooperation, the potential and perspectives for more collaboration between the Caribbean, Brazil, and the African continent. And then to wrap up the evening, we have a final conversation called Charting Our Own Courses, Business in the Black Community, where we hear from some female and Black business owners in the diaspora. So stay tuned, and you can find more information about these talks on our website at www.theblackconsciousnessfestival.com. Thank you for joining, and have a good night all. Thank you.